Hi guys, I'm Chris.
And I'm Mike.
And welcome back to No Limits, a Mitch Rapp podcast. What's new this week, Mike?
Hey, not much. Winter break is over. We're getting deep into January, and glad to be doing our final Mitch Rapp book review here on the podcast.
Part one of our final Mitch Rapp book review, yes.
True.
It's very exciting. I can't believe this moment came here. I'm glad that you have power. I was a little worried that we were going to have to postpone this because my parents are still without power.
Oh, man.
They couldn't get out of their subdivision. I don't know if people don't watch the news or whatever. There's a huge snowstorm this past weekend, or past week when you hear this, in Northern Virginia. And yeah, my grandma had a friend that was stuck on 95 for 19 hours.
Oh, man. Dude, disaster.
All he had was like the bottom part of a McDonald's cup full of sweet tea to drink. And then he started like putting snow in the cup and then putting it on the roof of the car to melt it, and then he would drink that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, we had about 8 inches near me, which to big parts of this country does not sound crazy, but our infrastructure is not ready for that in Northern Virginia. So yeah, it shut down the DC metro area. Oh yeah, bad news. Even Senator Kaine.
I saw
Senator
that.
Tim Kaine was stuck on the highway for like a full 24 hours. Like,
he drives himself like 2 hours like to DC every week. That's funny.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, we got about 8 inches too. I don't know. So coming from upstate New York, this is nothing. Like,
right?
But
exactly.
Everyone doesn't know how to drive. I feel like everyone needs to go live in, just do a little summer camp up in upstate New York near Canada. Do some driving lessons, and then approach, or Virginia needs to get on the infrastructure. So
yeah, they're weak down here, man. They're weak. It's weak. Kind of glad we had a snow day, though. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, that was. I had the federal government was closed, which is nice. So it reminds just one little thing. It reminds me of when I went to England. I touched down, and London had the worst snowstorm they had had in 30 years. Like, it's cold in England, but it doesn't snow that often. I mean, it rains a lot, but for some reason, it just island weather just doesn't snow. And so it snowed, and it maybe was 4 to 8 inches, max 8 inches. I think Gordon Brown was the prime minister, and it was 2010. And he said, people were asking him why he didn't buy sand. And he's like, why would I buy sand when I only need it every 30 years? That was his response. Oh my God, it was crazy. There was snow and ice on that would be when you were in Rome.
Yeah, we had a dusting in Italy, and it was unheard of. Like, it didn't shut it down or like make people go nuts, but we were more awed because they just don't get snow in Rome. And
really?
So it was just a dusting, but it was just kind of cool to see everybody in the city just light up about it.
Interesting. But yes, you mentioned we're getting to our last, let's bring it back in. We're getting to our last book in the series to date. Obviously, any new book comes out, we'll be talking about it. But for now, this is our last book. Red War, Kyle Mills. It's what I'm calling this the Russia trilogy, even though like the middle book, they weren't at Russia, but Grisha was one of the main, I guess, bigger characters in that. So definitely like this flows like a 3-book arc you could feel with at least Grisha being in all 3, right? I don't know, just we could kick it off and say like, what did you think of the first half of this book?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I was really enjoying it. It was refreshing, and I like Grisha being front and center. He's a character we've liked in the background the last couple of books. We enjoyed meeting. It was kind of nice to have him fleshed out, have a whole storyline, a whole plot with him personally involved, not just as this, robo killer guy. That was cool at first when we met him in the warehouse facing off against Scott.
Yeah.
But I think I wanted this next level depth of his character, and boy, do we get it here. I think some people would say that's maybe at the expense of more time with Mitch. I don't feel that way. I think if Kyle or anybody else thinks feedback on this book has been too much Grisha, not enough Rapp, I don't think that's where the flaws come out in the book. I think there's some other things about the plot later on that we're going to get to, particularly in part 2. But I actually enjoyed being with Grisha, so I think Krupin's a fantastic villain. I think the people Krupin surrounds himself with create a great cast of characters to be on the bad side, in the bad guys club. He's a great big bad. We haven't had a big bad in a while that truly, scares you to the bones. Vince was great at that. Kyle, I don't know if we've had that level of big bad. A Krupin definitely rises to that. And so, yeah, I generally enjoyed where Kyle's going with the story, with the characters, with the setting. What do you think, just generally?
Yeah, no, you mentioned this. I actually didn't mind. I didn't really think about like the heavy usage of Grisha until you brought it up. I was like, oh yeah, that kind of it is, but I didn't find myself minding it because I thought that it brought out some of these conversations that Rapp like just wouldn't have with anybody else. Maybe he would have them with Scott, but Scott's a different person, right. And like they're not going to have deep emotional conversations. And like Grisha's not like trying to have an emotional conversation with Rapp, but the parallels in their lives leads to, and that's going to be something we're going to hit home today, is this idea of this duality between these two characters. And I feel like since Order to Kill, Kyle's been setting that up like this. Is Grisha as good as Rapp? Is he, or is Rapp, or what is their stature in the hierarchy? And it's interesting to see how similar these two characters are to each other. And I really want to touch about some of those conversations that they end up having. And yeah, I thought that the first half of the plot was fine. I could see it where I haven't finished it yet. You have. I don't remember the ending, but I could see where some of the things are maybe could come off the wheels with the plot. But so far I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. And you know what I do every time I enjoy a book? I like to review that book in the form of a limerick. There once was a dictator named Maxim Krupin, a well-crafted analog for the real Vladimir Putin. He bets NATO is weak, then goes on a kill streak, but Grisha won't go down without shooting. Kyle Mills writes a true geopolitical thriller about Russia's leader with time as his killer. Red War is just fine. A few things do shine. In the end, a bit too much unlikely filler. So that was my thoughts, but I know you like to also give us the stats, right? You got the numbers on what the people thought about Red War.
I guess I'm the Steve Kornacki in this situation.
There you go. I'm the Amanda Gorman. I'll write the poems.
Yeah.
You bring the Steve Kornacki analysis. We could have a whole election to inauguration, news media coverage right here.
There we go. Yeah. So Goodreads on this was very interesting. So I did a little deep dive, and because we're getting to the end, I wanted to have we have like a little spreadsheet with all of our books, all of our ratings that we've given, some harsh ones, and all of the Goodreads scores throughout. And for this one, it's a 4.17, which is intriguing because it's the lowest of all the books, and it's the lowest by like a pretty wide margin. And it does have a decent amount of, so it wasn't like a outlier in terms of,
right.
It's been rated just as many times as some of all of Kyle's other books. Obviously not as many as Vince's books, because, over time these things just have people more and more read them, right? And obviously American Assassin has like 80,000. It's crazy. But yeah, and then Amazon, a little bit more favorable. I don't know, like, it's interesting to see these Amazon. I don't know how much I trust these Amazon ratings versus a Goodreads rating. Like what do you take?
There's got to be bots involved also, is my guess. And then I feel like Amazon is going to be more a consumer, less of a reader. Someone who bought the book or gave it as a gift who go like, oh, I think my son's going to love it. 5 stars, or I'm giving this to my, my wife or husband. And, they just put a rating for their purchase, right? Amazon delivering it. Was the box intact? Whatever. Where Goodreads is going to be.
It's like a 5 stars. I got the book.
Right. Goodreads is going to be just the readers, the fans of the series, people who are deep into books, reviewing them, posting about them. So I lean towards a Goodreads score, more of a reader's point of view, and Amazon more as a consumer, because that could possibly be the shipping and whatnot as well. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Which I'm not sure if this is 100% true, but I know Goodreads is connected with my Kindle. So I'm wondering, is it also an AWS?
Good point.
Owned by AWS or owned by Amazon?
Yeah, Goodreads is an Amazon company. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how if their rating systems are that different. Well, there's a big discrepancy here in the scores, right? 4.6 on Amazon, 4.17 on Goodreads. That's a wide margin.
Yeah, it is. And it's only, so Amazon has 4,000, almost 5,000 ratings, whereas Goodreads, I think, had close to 12,000. So it was just interesting. Like, sorry, I harp on this because, people have been, or Kyle has said he's gotten a lot of blowback from this, and I guess it shows on the Goodreads score. So
yeah.
Anyways, the Goodreads summary. When Russian President Maxim Krupin discovers that he has inoperable brain cancer, he is determined to cling to power. His first task is to kill or imprison any of his countrymen who can threaten him. Soon, though, his illness becomes serious enough to require a more dramatic diversion: war with the West. Upon learning of Krupin's condition, CIA Director Irene Kennedy understands that the U.S. is facing an opponent who has nothing to lose. The only way to avoid a confrontation that could leave millions dead is to send Mitch Rapp to Russia under an impossibly dangerous orders. With the Kremlin's entire security apparatus hunting him, he must find and kill a man many deem to be the most powerful in the world. Success means averting a war that could consume all of Europe, but if his mission is discovered, Rapp will plunge Russia and America into a conflict that neither will survive. Bum, bum, bum.
All right. I feel like that it's a good summary. It's got a lot of the plot. I'm less inclined to talk with you just about the plot and this happened, then this happened. And I'm more inclined to pull out some themes, because I think Kyle's doing something really unique here with a lot of the themes he brings up, and not necessarily, this chapter to this chapter to this chapter. I don't know. What do you think about that approach?
Yeah, no, it's great for me. I mean, essentially, this book starts out with, we get reacquainted with Krupin. We get reacquainted with Grisha. Mitch saves Grisha. Mitch saves Grisha again. And Krupin has some problems with some medical history, or has some medical problems, and begins to plot his plan.
Right.
So.
And in all that, Kara, Grisha's girlfriend, gets shot in the back, taken to the hospital. She saved him by bowling over one of Krupin's super soldiers who's attacking them in Costa Rica. Yeah, she totally tackles him, takes him to the ground, saving Grisha's life, but injuring herself. So yeah, that's it, right? President bad, Grisha wants to be good, President hunt Grisha, Rapp save Grisha, girlfriend in the hospital, Rapp and Grisha got to go hunt down Krupin. It's, what it is. But a couple of things come up for me. The way Grisha and Rapp are compared is one of them. And it kind of had me going back to Extreme Measures. So I wanted to just play this out. I feel like for a number of reasons, this might be Kyle's version of Extreme Measures.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And like I said, I didn't think about this until you brought it up, but it completely makes sense. In that book, which also apparently got backlash. I couldn't find anything online, but at least we've heard from anecdotes from David, right, or some other people about how they didn't like this emergence of a new main character. Even though I could argue that Mitch is just as much as a main, they're more co-main characters than being subservient to Mike Nash in that book.
That's like Grisha and Rapp here.
Exactly. And I kind of enjoyed it because I feel like it brings a new, sorry, my daughter's in the background hiccuping. She won't go to bed. It brings a new element to this story that we haven't seen so far. You can only have just, Rapp being the tough, badass guy every novel. You need to bring some variety to these things. And I didn't mind it after having these two heavy stories where Mitch is the driving force in the narrative,
Exactly. And I think with Mike Nash, the way his family is brought into it it allowed Vince to explore the human impact of these things on an everyman, that we can identify with, where we can't always do that with Rapp. And I feel like Grisha with Kara is also hitting on that depth, different than what we've been through with Rapp, losing his wife, his unborn child. I feel like Rapp and Grisha's discussions about that can take on a new air, the same way back with Mike Nash, it took on a new level because Nash was somebody who had a family like most of the readers do. And here it even gets to the point where Grisha and Rapp are sitting in a car. They just came off an op and they haven't seen, or Grisha hasn't seen Kara yet since she's been shot saving him in this ambush out of the blue. And he's scared to go in. He's asking Rapp for advice. Oh shit, what do I say to her? And Rapp's like, no, I'm not getting caught in this one. You say whatever you want to say to her. But he basically tells Grisha, like, look, it's not like me and Anna. Anna knew what I did. She knew who I was. We went through the rockiness of that together in an open way. And one thing Rapp says is, Anna had the freedom to choose to be with me, regardless of all that. You didn't give Kara that same freedom. Not that you lied to her, but you didn't allow her to make the choice to be okay with who you are and what you do. You denied that to her. So he's like, I'm not going to tell you what to say, but you have to go in there and just say whatever feels right. You can't hide.
Exactly. And I thought it was interesting that Mitch is able to talk to Grisha about Anna, which he has not been able to do. And there's even a previous conversation where, is it in the hospital? Mm-hmm. Right after it, they finally get her from Costa Rica to Bethesda. Or no, it might not be.
It's the hospital in Costa Rica.
Is it at the hospital in Costa Rica? That's what it is. They finally get her to the hospital in Costa Rica, and Mitch goes to see Grisha in an empty bedroom, and Grisha flips on him.
He fights him.
And he fights him. And I think he causes him to have a cut on the back of his head. But at some point he brings up his dead wife and the fact that he let his wife get killed, essentially. And Rapp says, if it was any other man, like or any other person,
it would have been his last words.
That person would have been dead. Yeah, exactly. But the interesting situation that Grisha's in, and being this ultimate killer like Rapp is, I think Grisha even calls Mitch the American version of him, and Grisha is the Russian version. They're copycats. They're just one's from Russia and one's from the United States. So Rapp has respect for that. And he understands what he's going through. But then, and Rapp does clap back and says the only difference is Anna died.
Kara didn't die, right. And in that specific instance, Rapp says, of course, my first inclination, if you bring up that I was responsible for Anna's death, is I would kill you. But he says, I think Grisha's actually asking because he's in the same boat. It's empathetic. Right. He's saying,
right.
It's not Grisha just bringing it up to burn me. Grisha's actually wondering, how do I get to the other side of living with myself after this? And it's almost like he's looking up to Rapp as a mentor because Rapp got to the other side. He came through it. And so I think it's really, really, he's really smart for Kyle to put that in. And it goes back to that quote. We were doing the fan appreciation last week, and we mentioned those quotes, people saying, we just want the unhinged Rapp. I forget the word they used, but it was like impulsive. We want an impulsive, unhinged Rapp just going out there. I don't want that. I want the Rapp that we already know, and his conversation like this with Grisha is not unhinged. It's not impulsive. It's a really, really mature, grown up, not the American assassin, lax bro. And I'm glad Kyle took him to that point. And instead of getting out of conversations like this, thinking, oh, I just need to put him in the next fight, I'm so glad Kyle's brave enough to put things like Grisha and Kara's relationship into Mitch's lap.
Yeah. And it just adds more depth to Mitch's character. Because like I said, there's no other person that maybe Irene he would have a conversation with about this, but that I feel like he's even doubtful. So there's no other place where it would feel right to have, to even introduce a conversation where we would be able to reach into Mitch's inner psyche a little bit more, you know? So it makes sense to show that here and to allow us to dig deeper into this character that we love. But I will say that, like, they're right before the scene that you mentioned where they're back in Bethesda in the hospital, they just had a pretty kick-ass scene in that house in Russia where Rapp does some major killing and like shoots people like through the smoke and through like a what is it, an armoire like full of, he's like, I don't even know what the thing was full of, but it was just burning really
different
fast.
colors. Yeah.
My thing is, it was stuffed with money. Like that's what my first thing was.
Burning.
Like, it was just stuffed with money, and like the like different color money was, not American money, but like, European notes or something like that.
Dude, so there were some pretty badass kills. In that house is where they go to see the oligarch because they want to know what Krupin's up to. And so obviously they go to one of the most powerful men in Russia that Grisha says really pulls the strings in the country. In addition to Krupin, there's a small group of these wealthy businessmen who run the show. So they go to see him, and this might be one of the cooler Rapp kills, and they know they're about to get ambushed in this mansion. He pulls the pin on a grenade, places this guy's body face down, so they'll need to turn him over to ID him. He puts the grenade with the handle still depressed under the dead body, and he goes, the old man owes these guys one last fuck you. He goes around the corner, and when the ambush team sees him dead and they want to ID him and flip him over, boom, the grenade goes off and wipes out this whole team. Like, that was awesome.
That was pretty sick. I was disappointed, though, that we didn't have more time with that oligarch. I'm blanking on his name.
Chkalov.
Chkalov, yeah. He was like a huge fanboy of like both Grisha and Mitch Rapp. Like, he knew all about him. I guess they said that he has like a lot of contacts and he knows everything about everybody. But he knew, like, he even mentions like the fact that Rapp switched from a Beretta to a Glock. Dude. He knew exactly which gun. Like, he is like us, and probably like, he's like the Ryan Steck. If Ryan Steck had a character, like that would be
Dude,
him.
It's so true. Rapp's suspicious. Like, why did this guy let us up with these weapons? He knew we were on his property. He knew we were coming. He didn't have any of his guards search us. It's because he wanted to see and hold Mitch's weapon. And he asked him, I know you switched from the Beretta, but is this the same Glock that you've been using, since you made that change? And Rapp's like, nah, I've had to toss a few along the way. And he's like, interesting. Of course, Mitch Rapp would use stock weapons and not these exotic, fancy attachments. He just wants an old school, straight up kill. And he goes, Grisha over here adds all the fancy, exotic attachments and becomes, emotionally connected to his weapon and can't part with it. Where Rapp would just use stock, throw it away when he doesn't need it, go on to the next. That's cool.
I think he even says, of course, it's the man, not the man behind the weapon, and not the weapon
itself.
I love that line.
Exactly.
The other thing that this guy knew is he knew that Stan Hurley took a bite out of Louis Gould on, like, as he was dying. Like, the fact that, like, he just knows this, like, probably highly classified stuff. I was just like, holy shit.
He almost drops that just casually, like, just as a fanboy, not even to show, like, look how connected I am. I'm inside the CIA. I know all of this info. He just says it because he wants to bro out with these two awesome, killers that he kind of idolizes.
That was a funny scene.
So that scene is also interesting because you mentioned earlier, this book kind of puts Grisha and Rapp together, showing they have a lot in common. But while it's doing that, it's also showing their differences. And this guy in particular, he's saying how the weapons are set up differently. He even says Grisha would kill in a cold, boring way, but Rapp is different. He mentions how they each kill different in methodical ways and why he was excited they were both coming together, because he didn't want to just die by Grisha's, just boring kind of like killing you like a machine. He knew Rapp would have some flair if he came to kill him. And then he also says, in a conversation on the drive up, Grisha's thinking how he's used to fully prepared ops, and Rapp disarms him and just goes, don't worry about it. We're just going to waltz in there and make it up as we go. And Grisha's entirely uncomfortable. He doesn't like improvisation. He doesn't like walking into unknowns. And so in the car where he's kind of concerned by that and Rapp's like, "Oh, it's all good. We'll just make it up as we go." It just shows a key difference in their operating mentalities. And I like that while these characters are being compared, they're really also being contrasted in how they operate.
Yeah, we've seen Grisha act like that, right? He was super meticulous in order to kill with, going through with Krupin's mission in Saudi Arabia. And every time the president sort of like threw in these different things, it caused him anxiety. Right. Yeah, they're very different, but also very similar. And I like that we keep Kyle keeps bringing us back to these touch points between the two of them.
He's so prepared, Grisha, that in Costa Rica, he has everything nailed down, kind of like Rapp would at the house in Manassas.
Yeah, Rapp even says he installed a similar blast door in his basement so he could get out. Let's talk about that scene a little bit. I liked that jungle scene, and it brought me back to, which I guess would be Kyle's next book, the Lethal Agent jungle scene, where Rapp is fighting or being chased by somebody, and he gets over to the high ground, and then at one point he gets bit by a snake, but like the Kevlar gloves save him, and then he's like, all right, he chucks that over, and hopefully it bites the guy on his way, and then he shoots a freaking grenade launcher at this dude.
Because Grisha had the grenade launcher in like a cache of weapons in case he ever needed to use the blast door out of the southwest corner of the basement. He even had a mattress in the basement. So if you have to blast the wall out, you don't get hit with the shrapnel. You hide behind the mattress. And then right outside is a cache of weapons, including a grenade launcher. And that was also a cat and a mouse game through the woods there, because Grisha's got to carry Kara. Rapp is going to split so that the chasers, can't ambush them together. They have to split their forces to go after him. He knows Pushkin will go after the one that he thinks Grisha is. So, yeah, they're trying to outsmart this other guy, Pushkin, who I don't know if I liked his character. It was kind of just like a reiteration of who Grisha was. I guess it just shows that Krupin needs his next, bogeyman. But what do you think of this Pushkin guy?
Yeah, so it's mentioned multiple times that he has the agility and he moves with his quickness, which were also things that Kyle used to describe Grisha. And I guess he has a similar backstory, right? And he's on this special regimen of drugs, and he's essentially a super soldier. It kind of reminds me of, I don't want to say Bucky in Captain America, because I like that. I like Bucky more so. I guess it's like in T2, right? There's the one Terminator left, so another one replaces him. You know, it's a trope that is we've seen done before. Yeah, and it's not uncommon. So I guess he was just not interesting to me.
Same, exactly.
He didn't have his own. I guess we just didn't spend enough time with him. Right. We didn't really understand his motivations. We got into the head of Grisha in order to kill, and then continued to get more into his head. I guess it was only really 2 chapters in Enemy of the State, and then now we're really in his head. But yeah, he was just Grisha 2.0, or not even Grisha 2.0. He was more like Grisha 0.5. Half of what a Grisha actually is.
I think you're spot on.
So yeah, to me, it was uninteresting.
Yeah, I agree.
But it sort of had to be there, I guess.
You need of course, Krupin's going to have the next person up fill the role. So I guess you need to do it. Just left me wanting. Although, okay, if Pushkin kind of fell flat, there's another character that is just ridiculously well crafted. I think the backstory on this guy and the way he's brought in is fantastic. And that's Andrei Sokolov.
Oh, yes. He's probably one of the highlights of the first half.
Absolutely.
This dude is fucking crazy.
He's a crazy dude. So Krupin basically needs somebody he trusts.
Yeah. All right. So we haven't even gotten to the elephant in the room, right? That we kick it off. Russia is in chaos. He's slipping. We know he's having these migraines. He's having some, I mean, he thought Parkinson's or whatever, shaking. having trouble remembering things. And then we find out that he has this tumor, and that at first they believe it's benign, but then they realize it's cancer, and he only has 6 months to live, and they have to do all this stuff. And this leads to a bunch of different hijinks in the mountains of Russia, where he kidnaps all of these, it's essentially a kidnap of all of these medical professionals, as well as kidnaps other patients, Russian citizens who have similar conditions to him. So they could, like, this is all the general's idea to test these other patients to see how they would react before they actually try it on the president. But yeah, he needs someone to trust. He needs like a right-hand man, because one, he can't trust his doctor, because the doctor, like, the doctor just put some medicine into him and kill him. So he needs someone that, and he knows that his power is, he can't look weak. Right. And that's his big thing. Like, he can't be weak. So by bringing in the Sokolov guy, it's sort of like a slow progression to realizing that Sokolov is crazy. Because when we first meet him, he's just this like sort of mild-mannered guy. Although it is mentioned that he's wanted for war crimes, casually. You know.
Yeah. So actually, his background is ridiculous. He was wanted for war crimes in Georgia. So if you think of like a pretty sore spot in Russian power and Russian ego, it's Georgia, right? And the Chechens and the breakaway and the terrorists. And so he apparently went into Georgia and just started like indiscriminately just wiping people out. So he was wanted for war crimes. Krupin had to fire him, essentially say he had no more power in the army. He was being demoted just as a way to kind of clear his name so he wouldn't go down that path. And he became almost this like philosopher king.
I know, that was interesting.
He picked up chess.
He like reads scientific articles, right? And does chess.
He's keeping a map of all Russian troop movements, even though he's not on the inside. He's trying to put together from scraps of clues in the news and Western media so he can stay abreast. And then when Krupin comes in and crashes his home, he moves his chess pieces around on this board to show where the actual Russian troops are in Ukraine.
Where they actually are.
And Sokolov's like, so I was right about that one, but I missed that one. They're actually over here. So he's like wargaming. The role that was taken away from him, he can't give it up. He's still like wargaming it out in his bunker, in his house.
I thought there was this funny line, it's sort of throwaway, but I thought it was funny how he says doctors are, he criticizes doctors because the doctor like won't try these things. He's like, they're not real scientists. Right. And like, you know, a true scientist would do all these experiments, which sometimes I think about that, you know, it's like I do as a scientist myself. I do all these experiments and they may lead to something, but will it ever be translationally done? Probably not. Whereas so Sokolov reads this paper and it's like, ooh, I'm going to try that on the president. Wait, no, I can't try it on the president. I'm going to try it on a random Russian citizen. And if they die, who cares?
He doesn't care about the consequences or the human impact. He cares about the idea, you know? It's like what communism was, like the ideas of Marx and Lenin, like, okay, maybe that sounds right. And maybe equality was the goal, but he doesn't care that in practice, it becomes Stalinism, you know? It becomes ethnic cleansing. It becomes the purge. It becomes famines. He's so focused on, but we're experimenting with an idea, and he's okay with that. He was a propaganda chief. You know, he was like a Goebbels or somebody. That's a dangerous position for someone that fantastical in their mind. But what you said about science makes me think of one of my favorite Gandalf quotes I had to look up. Little Lord of the Rings here. He that breaks a thing to find out what it is has left the path of wisdom. I feel like Sokolov would just break everything, experiment on everything, not care about the consequences. And as Gandalf says, that's a sure way to leave the path of wisdom.
That's a sure way to leave the path. All right. Well, that's the first thing you have to do in science. You have to break it in order to figure out what it is. So
right, but we also need ethics in the sciences.
What can you break? Very true.
You can experiment on some things, but you want to ask, what am I breaking for the sake of knowledge?
No, very true. Very true. Yeah, you mentioned this idea thing. I think it's even brought up that he's a fact of old Russia, and he believes in this good old days of the, you know, the USSR, like, and that is the main sticking point to where I believe we're going down this crazy path of this plot.
Right.
that he brings up like sort of at the end of where we're going to talk about today. And his plot, which Krupin had a plot, which is very similar to what's going on right now in today's society in terms of this Russian troop buildup in Ukraine. So Krupin had the idea to, you know, in concert with a bunch of propaganda that the Ukraine is doing bad stuff to the native Russians that live in Ukraine, they're going to invade Ukraine, take over. Hopefully that will stop and prevent, you know, any sort of NATO action, cause people, you know, essentially the downfall of NATO, or what he believes may lead to the downfall of NATO. But Sokolov wants to take it one step further and definitively get to the downfall of NATO. I don't know. And I'm reading this, and as I know you're a geography teacher, I'm like, you must be loving all this description of the Baltics and Finland. I didn't realize Finland's not part of the not part of NATO.
Oh no, because if they were, that'd be a huge deal with the Russians. The Russians and the Finns. Yeah, huge history of whether they should be closer aligned to Europe or they should still be within Russia's umbrella. Yeah, very contentious. And so you're right, Ukraine is almost going to be the red herring of Russia's always postured there. I mean, even before 2014 and the annexation of Crimea. But yeah, the Sokolov guy now wants to take it so far as going to the Baltics, independent countries, full members of NATO, because Ukraine is not. He wants to invade Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, which is just bizarre by modern standards for someone to be contemplating that. And the big reason for that is Article 5. So most of you probably know this, but you called me out, Chris, as the geography nerd. Article 5 in the North Atlantic Treaty, which is the document forming NATO, it's the clause that states if any one country is invaded or attacked, it shall be constituted as an attack on the whole of NATO. So you can't go to war with one country of NATO. You'll be at war with all 30 whatever of them. The idea was that will keep the balance of power and prevent what Sokolov wants to do here. But he and Krupin are willing to take the gamble that no one's going to enforce Article 5. And if NATO has no enforcement and can't defend its members, the whole alliance will fall apart and be rendered useless. That's the big gamble that basically Putin and all the pressure that they're putting on their border with Norway, their relationship with Finland, the Baltic states, Poland, Ukraine, when he took Crimea in 2014, and when the whole Ukrainian civil war broke out, the big question was, he's doing this in a non-NATO country. Would NATO respond if he did it in a NATO country, in Poland, in Latvia, in Lithuania? And Kyle's playing with that idea. It's like a Brad Thor. Like, I feel like I'm reading a Brad Thor novel here.
I was going to bring this up. Wasn't there a whole Article 5 plot in a Brad Thor novel?
There had to have been. I don't recall specifically. There had to have been.
So Brad loves these, you know, the geopolitical stuff, like with that kind of stuff. That's his shtick. Then there's definitely, like, how I first heard about Article 5 was probably, you know, I'm not a geography person, was reading a Brad Thor book. Once we get to that book, if we ever get to those books, that'll come up. But yeah, this is crazy to me, and he's banking on came out in 2018, right?
Right. So now we're talking the Trump era.
Yeah, Kyle has all these things that are sort of, and he's writing it in 2017, or, you know, starting to write in 2017. So that's the first year of the Trump presidency. Is that Brexit happening? Because he mentions Brexit in that. So yeah, I guess Brexit happened in this book.
2016. Yeah. So he'll be writing this a year after Brexit, right?
He mentions that Hungary and Poland are becoming more authoritarian, and now they've only become even more authoritarian. He also mentions Turkey becoming authoritarian and turning inward. He mentions a lot of things that are happening directly, you know, one-on-one parallels, you know, taken from our society. It's just very interesting to see the headspace that he was in and how he incorporates, you know, our universe into Mitch's universe.
Right. I mean, listen to how Krupin's breaking down everything you just said. Krupin almost sounds like Putin. Listen to some of these quotes.
Yeah, it does.
And I don't know about you, but this eerily seems, for the series, a bit too on the nose, too close to home. Listen to this, quote, "The world is so complex that the average person is no longer able to understand it. In the face of that, they can be counted on to retreat into tribalism, nationalism. People need something to hate to reinforce their own identities. And it's the internal threats, the people they interact with every day, whom they hate and fear most." Is that 2020 in a nutshell?
Yeah, I mean, Kyle's always been a little bit of a Nostradamus, so at least with his last couple books. So,
and just Ukraine popping up again. Okay, and then we want to talk about Putin because he's also writing this. What did we say? The first or second year of the Trump presidency. So it's right in the midst of Russia's interference with our election. Putin as a dictator. You know, he changed the Constitution right around that time to eliminate the term limits.
To go from prime minister to president, or from president to prime minister. I forget which one.
Yeah, I forget which one, but it was so he's president, and it was 2 consecutive terms as president. He served both those consecutive terms, had appointed, or he got Dmitry Medvedev to be elected to president, and the president gets to appoint the prime minister. So who did Medvedev appoint as prime minister? Putin. So Putin got to be prime minister in between. And it said 2 consecutive terms, so I can run again. So after his stint as prime minister, he then went back to president and did another 2 terms, but he had changed it to 6-year terms instead of 4-year terms. So he had 2 4-year terms. He had a stint as prime minister. Then he changed the Constitution to allow him another 2 6-year terms.
And then didn't he just change it again so he can run for a 3rd term?
Just in 2020, they changed it again to say the 2 term limits only applies to henceforth. It doesn't apply to current or former leaders. They're not beholden to the 2-term limit rules we just made, giving himself another 2 terms of 6 years, so another 12 years. Because the law didn't apply retroactively, the term limits didn't apply to him yet because it was a new law. New term limits, new law. So he's got another 12 years.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, Kyle's really hitting home here and bringing up everything directly that is happening in present day Russia. Like, it's not even like trying to mask it at all. It's straight word for word, what is going on. And I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about that? Being so present in your summer beach read.
Yeah. So I enjoy it. I like nerding out about it. So when I'm reading about NATO and the difference between the Russian president and prime minister, which one's the figurehead, who actually has the power? The answer is, by the way, whichever one Putin is the one with the power.
Yes, of course.
So I enjoy it, but that's another thing. There's these protests going on, and
what's the guy's name? Alexei, the guy who got
Prokhorov? No,
the Novichok, like toxin.
Yeah.
In his underpants.
Navalny, Alexei Navalny.
But
here you get a guy like him leading these protests, and Putin just unleashes the troops and just slaughters them in the streets. It's like a Tiananmen Square or something. And just like, again, 2020 with the protests. And I think there's a line even somewhere that he would get a thrill from seeing the police crack the skulls of a bunch of young liberal, I don't know, something about, here it is. Sure, his hardcore supporters would get a thrill from seeing the police bust a bunch of young liberal heads, but the blowback, both internal and external, would hit hard. He doesn't care about Russia, or his people, or his family, or his friends. All he cares about is staying in power, and it's hard to blame him. My retirement's going to be about getting paid $500,000 to make a speech and playing too much golf. Dude, this is in the Trump era. Protesters getting off on beating liberals, watching the police beat them in the streets, retiring $1 million for a speech and playing golf. Like,
it's crazy. It's really crazy.
So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed this kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I liked it. It was something that was interesting to me that I wanted to ask you because, I don't know, sometimes I feel like if I want to get away from society, and so I could see how maybe Kyle with his latest book tried to put more of this stuff and then it was taken out. Whereas here it was left in, like you could see the differences there.
Yeah, that's true. Well, do you think he's wanted to go down this path, or do you think Red War he knew was a little divergent from his bread and butter, in that a lot of the Stan Beeman stuff was FBI. Kyle's moved largely away from that in the Mitch Rapp series. Some of his earlier books, scientific research, biology, viruses actually, kind of like nerdy stuff, that comes through in Lethal Agent and Total Power. I feel like, do you think he deliberately with Red War went geopolitical a little outside of his wheelhouse, or do you think that's something he likes doing and wanted to do?
I don't know. I feel like he's still maybe finding what he wants to do with the series at this moment, because he had The Survivor, which was just, he had to like complete a story, and then he had Order to Kill, which was like almost like a Memorial Day, right? If you want to think about that, it's very similar. There's this plot of a nuclear destruction that's going to happen. Mitch has to save the day. I mean, I hate to like be like, oh, he's copying tropes from the earlier author, but I don't know, it's just the first thing that pops in my head. But yeah, I mean, you even made the comparison to today, how this feels like his version of Extreme Measures, putting a different character. So I don't know. I feel like he's trying things, and each of these books have been drastically different. That's how crazy this is.
That's true.
If you think about this, I wanted to bring that up. Then it moves from this Lethal Agent, completely different. Then Total Power, completely different, and then we're back to maybe something of resembling this with, but now it's internally with Enemy at the Gates.
That's interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
That's very interesting, because something I really liked when we started reading Kyle's books, even if it was a loose thread, how there was connective tissue and a thread running through the stories. If you think about Survivor, obviously it connects to The Last Man, Ahmed Taj, the Pakistanis, and all that. But then you definitely have Order to Kill, Enemy at the Gates being connected, Grisha a little bit in there, also the Saudi nuke going off, and the nuke plot connects the two. You then have Syed Halabi being brought back from Enemy of the State. He does come back in Lethal Agent, but Red War is kind of this disconnect. I feel like something I really liked that Kyle started out with was the books bleeding into one another and kind of being dependent upon one another. And now that I look at it, I don't know if I would say disappointing, but it's almost too staccato. Lethal Agent, Virus. Total Power, Grid. We don't even see the election that was mentioned in Lethal Agent. It just kind of dropped. And Total Power, we still have Alexander. And then, without even getting the election, we just jump into the cooks in Enemy at the Gates. And Grisha's just gone. So that's gone. Maybe you're right. These last three books just haven't connected enough for me. They might work as standalones. Maybe. I don't know. They're trying to sell them to new readers who can just not have any of the backstory of the series, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, it loses kind of the edge of what I've loved the series for and what I've loved about Kyle's earlier works. Yeah, we haven't really had that. These books have all been disjointed a little bit now that I think back over the last three.
Yeah, it just popped in my head, and it's also the way we ended up reading these, because we jumped to Lethal Agent right before Total Power, because we wanted to do this thing. So like we ended up, we read Lethal Agent. I loved it. You really enjoyed it, and then we read Total Power. Not as high on that one, and now we're finally getting back to all of these Kyle books in progression, and then it just dawned on me like, whoa. Right after this book, we then jumped to Lethal Agent. It's just like, that's crazy. I mean, the thread there is Halabi, right? The thread there is, but that's a villain from two books ago.
So part 2, we got to get into this. When we wrap up Red War, let's see if we're satisfied where it ends, leading into Lethal Agent. Because thinking back to it, I don't remember how I felt at the time when I went from Red War to Lethal Agent in 19? I think because I just loved Lethal Agent so much, I wasn't looking for that connection. But now that I want it and it's not there, it's a little underwhelming. So when we wrap up the book next week, let's try to think about how it ends and if we feel like that's a good transition to bring us into Lethal Agent.
Yeah, no, that's good. There's one other thing I want to bring up before we get out, unless you had any other things with the plot that you wanted to bring up. But, and you wrote this down too in the notes, this idea of coincidences.
Oh yeah.
And to me, this is National Treasure, Mission Impossible meets Mitch Rapp. I love those two things. But the fact that, all right, Mitch comes to save Grisha or get Grisha as soon as the Russians are there.
Right.
And then I guess Mitch does I kind of we didn't talk about that scene where the gas station scene in Russia where Mitch tracks him down and he's taken over this gas station that he knows Grisha's going to stop at this gas station to get gas in this random rural town. I mean, what if Grisha had already filled up and had a couple more tanks? That was my thing, but that's another coincidence. I like the dialogue there though, because he's Grisha doesn't trust Rapp that much, and he's like, "Well, tell your men to come on." He's like, "What men? I'm here by myself. I don't have he didn't have his gun out." That saved the scene a little bit there. And then the third thing is coincidence. This is just straight out of I don't know, crappy action movie where they get to the guy and then
Chkalov.
As they're talking, they hear helicopters and boom,
Yeah.
I guess we knew that there's so many Kins and
Pushkin, Krupin, Sokolov,
what's the
Chkalov.
Pushkin. There we go. I'm not very good. If you thought I was bad with the Islamic names or the Middle Eastern names, I am very bad with the Russian names. But Pushkin. We knew that he was coming, the two chapters before that sort of set him up, that we knew this was coming to a head, but I just felt like it was just I don't know. The coincidences were a little much for me.
I'm going to 100% agree with you.
That's got to be my loser of the first half.
Yeah.
For sure.
I mean, if we're doing winners and losers, I enjoyed the geopolitical stuff. I enjoyed the Grisha and Rapp stuff, their parallels, their differences, their emotional connection and depth. The coincidences. The first time when it happened in Costa Rica. Okay, there's a line that says
that's happened before.
Kennedy got intel that the power grid going down in Costa Rica was actually a Russian plot, and we thought, who lives in Costa Rica? Grisha. Let's go. There was reason for Rapp to be there at that time. Sure. I kind of wrote that coincidence off. And then when he randomly stumbles on him at the gas station, I knew you were coming here. How'd you know he was coming there? And then Chkalov takes this call or something and is like, oh no, I think Krupin's going to get me. Cue the helicopter sounds, coming over the mountain. They're coming for me. Right as Rapp and Grisha kind of walk in. It hit me over the head that many times with the coincidences. I'm going to put you on the loser list. Elf on the Shelf, naughty or nice. There it is. It didn't work. It didn't work. Unfortunately, Chris, I think you're in for some more similar, bizarre things like that in part 2. It gets a little wild. Just wait till you get to the nature conservationist stuff. I'm not even going to touch that yet. But unfortunately, yeah, I'm with you. That's a loser here.
But I didn't say my winners. But yeah, I agree with you that the conversations we get between Rapp and Grisha, and I don't know, I'm digging the first part of this plot. The idea and the geopolitical stuff, I like it. But like I said, I can see where these cracks are forming and how it could sort of go off rails. We've done this before where if you own, it's an interesting experiment to do is read half the book, think about it, think about how you like it, and then finish it, and then see, did it live up to its first half expectations, or did it get better?
We did that with, was it Order to Kill, where we really were jiving on the first half because we hadn't read the second half yet.
Exactly. Neither of us had.
So we're kind of amped up.
And we were vibing on that pod.
Yeah,
pod.
Dude. And then we came back for the second half. We were like, so about that.
It was like a big exhale, you know.
Yo, here's a question though. Since like literally our 4th or 5th episode of this podcast, we kind of hinted at sometimes the endings of Mitch Rapp books are not the best. I remember with Transfer of Power, we kind of thought that
we had a problem with Transfer of Power's ending.
I'm wondering do you think it's a theme overall that in the series they don't have as strong of endings as some other series?
I don't know. So this is something that comes up a lot, not only in books, but in movies and TV shows. It's hard to end things. You know, people talk about, I listen to a lot of, I love Marvel, and sorry, I bring it up a lot because that's one of my passions is Marvel and comic books. But people argue that Marvel and the MCU have a third act problem. And it's now bleeding into their TV work, and they have a problem with season finales. And I think it's just hard to end things. You know, people had a problem with the Game of Thrones ending. People had a problem with the Lost ending. People had a problem with the Harry Potter ending. I mean, I'm sure people had a problem with that. I don't know. It's probably it's easier to keep going than it is to end a story, right? So,
although, yeah, that's true. And another counterpoint to what I kind of just said is we also liked when the Mitch Rapp books have those 50 pages of nonstop race to the finish line. So some books definitely have delivered in that final closeout. I think of Lethal Agent, as one. So, yeah, and then sometimes
Consent
the
to
epilogues.
Kill. We love the ending of that.
Sometimes the epilogues were hit or miss.
Yeah, sometimes it's like the epilogue's not needed. I would rather just finish like the last book.
Right.
We talked about that in Enemy of the States, right?
Yeah. So mixed bag with endings and epilogues and closing out.
I think Memorial Day's ending is pretty good.
Right. Oh yeah, one of the best.
Consent to Kill's ending is, that you love that
That's
epilogue
awesome,
of that.
With the incendiary grenade down the throat in Spain. Yep.
Yeah, no, like I think there's goods and there's bad ones. It's hard to end things.
It's a mixed bag, yeah. All right.
Yeah. All right, so let's get out of here. Next week, we are going to be bringing to you our final book rating of this pod for now. Finishing up Red War. We have to thank our patrons, including our special operator, Sherry F., our special agents, Kevin, George, Matt, Don, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. Please subscribe, rate, and review using your favorite podcasting platform. You can find us online at mitchrappod.com or using Twitter and Instagram at mitchrappod. And as always, just let Mitch be Mitch. Just a disclaimer, this podcast is not affiliated with Vince Flynn, Kyle Mills, or Simon & Schuster, but thank you to them for bringing us the wonderful world of rap. And the music soundtrack is Guerrilla Tactics by Raphael Crooks.